presentation coming up called the Wood Wide Web. And this is the wisdom of the forest. So I want to share with you some of what I think is just absolutely incredible in the world. And let's make sure my notes stay visible for me. That's pretty necessary. Here we go. So when we are thinking about mushrooms, we have a lot of different views of what mushrooms are. But for this particular class, we're going to go over some very basic. I want to make sure you can see me over there. Cool. All right. We also have this up on the screen behind us, so I apologize for the Inception-like view that's happening over there. But all right, so when we're thinking and talking about mushrooms for today, I want us to talk about the life cycle of mushrooms that you are going to see at your farmer's market, at your grocery store, out in the woods. There are guild mushrooms, there are polypore mushrooms, there are the sclerotia that we talked about, there's molds and all sorts of different cool things. But for now, here's the basic of mushrooms and their life cycle. When we think of the fruiting body of a mushroom, the mushroom that we eat, that's only one stage of a mushroom's journey. The mushrooms themselves are the organism as a whole that's living underneath the ground or in the tree or wherever they're living. So the fruiting body that comes up over here is connected through the mycelium to the fruiting body that comes up over here. They're the same being. And there's a concept in psychology of this collective unconscious. It's this idea that we all humans came out of these primordial ancestral places. And over time, we developed these archetypes that we recognize in different forms. They might look different here and there, but there are these archetypal patterns that come up. And there's this collective kind of collaborative human consciousness that exists kind of underweaving all cultures and involving all people. And the archetypes that spring up are kind of like the fruiting bodies of this collective unconscious. So they come up here, they come up there, but it's all part of this collective web. When it comes to the mushrooms, the way that the life cycle works is that, like some plants, such as ferns or some algae and other beings, mushrooms reproduce by spores. They can reproduce asexually, they can reproduce sexually. There's all sorts of different variations because, surprise, sex and gender is not on the binary. But for the mushrooms here, what we need to know is that they create spores, these teeny, tiny little capsules of life. And then those little capsules of life are so small that they can travel a good distance. They can travel by wind, they can be breathed in and exhaled. They can travel up into the atmosphere and, like I talked about earlier, have rain form around them and come down far away. They can be spread by water. They're designed to go forth, and hopefully some of them will prosper. And so when the mushroom, which is the fruiting body of the fungi, fruits and creates these spores, you can kind of think of them like seeds. They've got all the genetic material that they need to recreate life. So the reproductive phases, they go through like 4 basic phases. The first is the spore phase. And that's when these little tiny units are created, they're released, And as soon as they get released, the host mushroom pretty much begins to decompose. It's done with its time on Earth in that form that it had. It's time to go back into the collective, get composted, do something else. They don't hold on to themselves for very long after that. They just return to the Earth. Now, those spores that are incredibly lightweight get carried until they touch down, and hopefully they touch down somewhere that they can inhabit. And mushroom spores can detect when they're somewhere where there's proper moisture and proper humidity, and there's food present, which I think speaks to the sentience of all beings and the parts of the beings. They can pick up on these things when they recognize that there's moisture there. It allows them to, and the right foods present, it allows them to start to grow into the next phase, which is when they form something called a germ tube. And that's the beginnings of hyphae. And so the germ phase it's the first multicellular outgrowth of this incredible divine organism. It's the first time that these single-celled spores start reproducing and expanding and reaching outward. And once they do that, then they enter the germ phase. So they've got their spore phase, they've got their germ phase, and then they enter their hyphae phase. And the hyphae is this structure that the fungus uses to start collecting nutrition from the world around it and start growing. So the hyphae web out, and they do look kind of like branches. They look kind of like tendrils as they web out. And they make these long, thin strings that spread through whatever the growing medium is. We're about to see it in some soil and wood chips, but this could be underneath the bark of a decomposing log or a tree. And they spread out and they release digestive enzymes to break down food so that they can grow even more. And so this is really cool. It's almost like they have their stomach gets put on the outside. They're like releasing these gastric juices and breaking things down. And this is critical not just for the growth of the organism, but for the sustained well-being of all of Gaia. Because if we don't have beings breaking down other beings, we don't have nutrition that's getting circulated. We have hoarding. And hoarding does not benefit the whole. When there are certain organisms that hold on to nutrition or hold on to their forms at all costs and they don't change, they create stagnancy, and that creates a deficiency in the system.
Sounds like our system right now.
It does. It sounds
like my brain was there.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking politics as personal, as spiritual, as ecological. Ecofeminism is a real thing. Like, this is collaboration, and I'm not meaning to say that like the forest is this beautiful place where no one gets hurt and everything is magical. Like, that's bullshit. Like, people eat people, eat people, eat people. Like, harm is caused. The squirrels don't have dental insurance, but let's face it, most of us don't either. So it's not all wonders and gentleness, but it is constantly moving. And as Octavia Butler wrote, God is change. Be change, be God. And we will definitely talk a little bit more about the most holy Octavia Butler later on. If you haven't read Earthseed, it's a tough read, but it's a glorious, glorious group of books. So the Earthseed trilogy. So hyphae, they're going out, they're looking for food, they're breaking things down so that those things don't stay stagnant and hoarded in one form that isn't really super useful anymore. They can go on and change. In a way, this stage is helping not just the decomposition of these living organisms, it's also helping them to be reborn as something new. So whether or not you believe in reincarnation or spiritual transformation from one being to another, there's no way you can't believe in the reincarnation of the atoms that are currently forming you in a human body and will soon be forming many, many other things. That is incredibly cool. So these hyphae are helping that to happen out in the woods around us, all over the place. Then they go to phase 4, which is the mature mycelium phase. Ah, we've gotten to mycelium, finally. Okay, so once the hyphae begin to form this big group, which in science terms is called a colony, we refer to that as mycelium. And those are essentially the mushroom roots. Mushrooms don't have roots, but they look kind of like roots, these mycelial mats that form, that come down. And they're not really coming down from the mushroom yet. Those mushrooms haven't been formed, the new ones, but they will be soon, because when the conditions are right, and Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about this in our beloved book, Braiding Sweetgrass, when the conditions are right and the air is moist and the soil is ready and the temperature is right, papawi, the mushrooms spring forth. And this is really cool because so these mycelium, which are made out of hyphae, are growing and they're consuming all of the organic material around them so that they can transform that material. And then when the conditions are right, there's enough carbon dioxide, the temperature levels are right, if the lighting is right, they bloom. They turn into mushrooms, they grow. And these mushroom blooms that take place at different seasons take place depending on the right conditions of the particular mushrooms. Right now, it's chanterelle season around here. If you go look under elms or in old apple orchards, under really old apple trees, you might see some very cool mushrooms called chanterelles coming up. Later on in the summer, we're going to go for walks and we'll find mushrooms that around here we call horn of plenty or black trumpets. Those are two cousins, but around here, colloquially, we refer to them as the same thing. And those horn of plenty mushrooms grow at a particular time when it's like late summer, early fall. Mushrooms grow depending on the conditions that are right for them. So it's kind of funny that at the time that this class is being recorded, it's springtime around here in Indakana, and there aren't a ton of new soft polypore or guild mushrooms coming up. But we will see some of the ones that are here hanging on from last year and growing again, such as turkey tails. So once these mushrooms begin to fruit and produce more mushrooms, they mature fully, they release spores, the cycle continues. When they're growing into hyphae, those spores begin to divide, and they do that only when they land in the right habitat. They immediately, those hyphae begin to look for water and food, and as soon as they connect with those things, they start to combine and grow more. Think of that in terms of your own growth, your own, not necessarily physical growth, but growth as a human being, the interests that you have. You might be super interested in something. You might have a skill set that has gone undiscovered. You might feel like you are working your hardest to live your dreams and it's just not working out. That's not necessarily a fault of you. It doesn't mean your dreams are flawed. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or you're not brave enough or strong enough or working hard enough. Get rid of that nonsense. It might just mean that the ecology of the place that you are isn't providing you with the right circumstances to thrive. You might need to go somewhere different where the substrate is something that you can grow on. You might need to wait until the conditions are more favorable. Again, There are so many bits of wisdom from the fungal world. It just blows my mind every time I think about it. So let's see, we've talked about that. Oh, so the majority of a fungi's life is spent as mycelium. Like when we think of Pando, which is the big colony of trees growing out west, I think they're aspen trees, and we think of them as like this giant organism that is all connected through the roots, but they're coming up as individual looking trees. They're all one organism. We have gigantic organisms of fungi that spread for miles, including the mycelium underneath Pando that is allowing that being to grow. They spend the majority of their life in the state of reaching out, networking, connecting, looking for things to eat, to transform. That is a really cool thing for us to think about for ourselves as well. Yes, you're going to spend time if the conditions are right and you're somebody who is into sexual activity, you'll spend some of your life in that reproductive or reproductive adjacent stage. If you're somebody who is interested in traveling, you'll spend some of your life traveling like those spores are traveling up. Maybe you had a really shitty childhood and you had to work really hard to go away from that parent organism and travel around and make your own way in the world and create your own networks. We all spend a good portion of our lives reaching out and connecting, craving that connection, craving the ability to be nourished and nurture others in return. I think that's a really important thing too, because this world is designed to make us feel kind of alone and isolated, and to isolate us very truly. So we spend the majority of our time on our phones and not in connection, and we feel really bad about ourselves. And so maybe we purchase things that people tell us will make us feel better about ourselves. Going outside and being reconnected to these beings that are growing around us, these kin folk that are more than human, can restore our natural calm, and that kind of ecotherapy can really help us to feel more resourced so that we can in turn go out and spread our mycelial webs and connect to other people more authentically, because we're less stressy and more ourselves and more able to gift our unique talents to the world. So yeah, so there's that. Now where we've talked about how mycelium are like this inside out tummy. They're secreting these enzymes to break things down. They're feeding off of dead leaves and wood and all of that stuff. Then when they're ready to start producing mushrooms, they make these structures that are called hyphal knots, which is such a kind of funny name. I feel like it would be a good name for a band, the hyphal knots. It's these hyphae that are referred to as primordium. And the hyphal knot stage is called pinning. And we'll see a slide that shows mushrooms pinning soon enough. So let's switch sides here, or switch slides. Let's see here. Okay, cool. So this is mycelium, these great connectors. Here's an actual picture of what mycelium looks like in the forest floor. They look like roots, like we talked about, but they also look like rivers. They look like beings. What is that? The nervous system. Yeah, they look like the. They look like the nervous system. They look like what they are, something originating from one point but branching out. Think about this in terms of you as somebody who originated in one place, but you are branching out. And the whole point of branching out is to find nutrition, to find a good habitat, to extend your network, so that you can continue growing and you can thrive and do it really well. And some of those ends are going to reach a wall. Some of those hyphal threads are going to reach a piece of rock that they can't break down. They just aren't secreting enough enzymes. Or they reach a rock and they can break it down, but it's going to take a hot minute. Some of them are going to reach a delicious group of little tiny microorganisms and nom it all up really fast and grow really quickly. Not all of the things that you do in your life are going to reach fruition. Not everything is going to get to the point where it pins and grows into a mushroom and spores and keeps going. But we have to keep experimenting. We have to keep reaching out. We have to keep being authentic and looking for ways to survive. And that, I think, is another good bit of inspiration from the mushroom world. Now, here's a picture of that pinning that we were talking about. So on the left side, you're going to see these tiny little mushrooms, and you can even see the caps. They're black, and the stalks of the mushrooms are white, and they're coming out of this inoculation medium there. And I don't know if you can see on the top of that yellow agar, which is the substrate that's growing on in that dish there. On the lower left corner, you can see some white cloud-like looking stuff. That's actually the mycelium there. And then in the picture next to that, that's a bag of that mycelial substrate, and growing out of that, anybody know what that mushroom is? Lion's mane. Yeah. That's lion's mane mushroom growing out of there. Lion's mane is one of my faves. We are definitely going to enjoy consuming that being in this class. So all of the white stuff in that bag is the mycelium that has inoculated the substrate, which is probably like some kind of grain there, is my guess. All right. So we also want to talk about what these beings are eating. What nourishes you is not the same thing as what nourishes somebody else. You might see someone who looks a lot like you, and they are thriving doing something that you're like, oh, if I do that thing, that's my way to have success. And that is not necessarily going to work if you are trying to live an authentic life in a way that isn't authentic to you. On the left, we have saprophytes. Saprophytes are breaking down dead things. They are breaking down the logs that fall to the forest floor. So instead of being a forest filled with dry logs, it's a forest filled with beautiful humus, the soil that life needs to grow. On the right, we see the parasites. Bless you. And parasites are exactly what they said. They are eating other living beings. And in this case, you can see a cordyceps mushroom who is growing out of the body of a beetle of some kind. And this too is necessary. It's not always pretty, but the world is endlessly creative. There are endless ways for its life. So let's see here. Yes. Okay, so how long does it take for these beings to grow? It depends. This is a morel. Morels are going to grow really quickly. It doesn't take very long at all for a morel to grow. They are at their complete life cycle in 6 days. This is an oyster mushroom. And these big, flabby looking oysters are growing off of, I'm not sure what kind of tree that is, maybe maple. And they're going to take 3 to 4 weeks to fully colonize that place. So the spores come in, they land on that kind of rotten wood or a place where there's a break in the tree. maybe in the bark, maybe it's been hit by lightning, and they're like, hey, here's an opening here. The spore lands. They're like, yes, I'm going to grow. It's going to take them 3 to 4 weeks to fully do that, colonize that substrate, and make fruiting bodies. Quicker if the thing that it is growing on, that growing medium, is something soft and ready to go, kind of like a grow bag. Shiitakes are going to take longer. Those are 6 to 12 months after inoculation before you see a fruiting body. And it's going to take longer if you're growing them on logs like this as opposed to bags. So we'll try some different techniques. We're not going to be growing shiitakes on logs, but we do have a lot of fallen branches that came down during the most recent nor'easter, and we've cut some of them up, and we're going to be stacking them up and putting some of those spent inoculated grain bags in them and see if that helps them grow faster. Because we too are endlessly creative and interested in experimenting. In fact, I even have an old foam mattress that I have saved because shiitakes are so good at breaking things down, breaking down oil spills and chemicals. And if you watch the Fantastic Fungi movie, you'll see some information about that. That I was like, I wonder if instead of putting this old unuseful mattress in a landfill, we could put a little piece of land aside, put the mattress outside, and inoculate this with shiitake. I have no idea. We're going to find out. We're not going to find out in the next 6 weeks, but we're going to find out.
Oysters are great.
Oysters, that's a great idea. Ooh, maybe we'll do half oysters.
Oysters are easier to grow too.
Oh my gosh, yes, this is very exciting.
Shiitake, they're easy, but they like the wood. They like
Yes.
more wood than
Yeah.
anything. Oysters are the ones that clean up the oil spills.
Oysters, thank you.
And they
Thank
clean
you.
the mercury out of lakes too.
Yes, okay, oysters, thank you. It wasn't shiitake, it was oysters. So we'll try, I think, the shiitake on the logs around the edge, and we'll try the oysters there. Maybe we can try putting some other different ones in.
Yeah, you
And-
do them every year.
Yeah, and we'll be collecting a lot of interesting mycelium from outside fairly soon. So, okay, we've gone from 6 days to 12 months. How about these ones? Anybody know what this organism is? Truffles. Nice one, Tiff. Yeah.
I have never seen them.
So
like
there
that.
are different kinds of truffles. There are many different kind of fungi. They're in the genus tuber. So there'll be tuber so-and-so, tuber such and such. But they can take over a decade from when a spore germinates until it produces fruit. These friends are masters in the art of waiting, but they are also masterful in the art of calling in the support that they need. Unlike a lot of different kinds of fungi, truffles release chemicals that smell amazing. These volatile aromatics are designed to travel through the soil, travel through the air, and become so intoxicatingly enticing that pigs and dogs and mice and other mammals will do the very difficult work of going down and digging in and finding these beings and dig them up, and in the process help move them along. And that's pretty cool too. So it's not just wind, it's not just water, it's like even utilizing animals. So when we talk about intelligence, who is using whom? We might be digging up our truffles and, grating them onto pasta dishes and buying them for thousands of dollars for a small little organism that only lasts barely a few days after they are taken from the ground. But that organism may have waited 10 years for the right truffle hunting dog to come by, and the right person to come by, and they, when the time was right, sent out the right smells. So they are good teachers in the art of attracting in what you want as well. And some truffles can be teeny tiny, Some of them can be the size of an orange. There's a lot of different kinds. So let's see. Okay, we've talked about different times of day. Now, there's another picture. I think I have a slide of this. I'm not entirely sure, but just in case I don't. Anybody here familiar with crimini mushrooms? Little ones you find at the grocery store sometimes. How about button mushrooms? Those are super common. Those white ones that get sliced and put on pizza. And yeah, so little buttons are about this big, and then the criminis might be a little bigger. They have a like fawn colored brown cap. And then there's, how about portobellos? We tried portobellos before. Dark gills, soft fawn cap, pretty big, right? That's the same mushroom. That is the same exact mushroom gathered at different stages of its life cycle. So that's Agaricus bisporus mushroom. And the Agaricus bisporus is one of the few varieties that we eat, that we humans harvest at these different stages of ripeness, if you will. So while the truffle is kind of hiding out, doing their thing until they're like, yes, I need to release some spores and I need somebody to dig me up to do it. So I'm making these smells come and find me. This mushroom is not doing that, but is so delectable and delicious at different stages that humans have been like, oh, we are actually going to cultivate you and pick you at different times. After the Agaricus forms what's called a primordia, that little teeny tiny hyphal knot kind of thing, the first type of mushroom that they make is that little white button. And then they grow up and out into a crimini and then into a portobello. Which is an interesting thing. If they're the same being and they have different names, just because they're recognized as being at different stages of their life, it's kind of like if we were like, oh, look at that kid, look at that young person, look at that adult, look at that old person, look at that little girl, look at that woman. If we can recognize the different stages of a being and call them by different names based on that stage, and that's just in a mushroom, we ought to be able to figure out when people change their pronouns. We ought to be able to not dead name people. It might not be easy all the time at first, but we ought to be able to figure that stuff out. And we sure ought to be able to recognize that grown women are not girls, because calling beings by the wrong terminology is not helpful for anybody. And cover your ears if you don't want sex ed worked into your herbalism classes. But there is one thing as an educator that I have heard and seen for the 25 plus years that I have been teaching. And that is, we have a tendency in this culture to refer to women's genitalia or female-bodied people's genitalia as vaginas, when what we're really talking about is vulvas, the outside part, the part that you can see. Let us start teaching our young people proper terminology, and maybe teach ourselves proper terminology so that we can be clear when we're asking for things or saying we don't want something or describing things that have happened to us or things that we want to have happen to us. A little tangent, but a mycelial one that needed to get worked into this class. All right, so we've been through all of these fun things. Any questions so far?
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
What was before truffles and after?
Let's see, we have talked about the, what did we talk about? We talked about oyster mushrooms. We talked about chanterelles. Yeah. Is there another one there? Let's go back. This one?
After the oyster.
A full, oh, right before that.
Yeah.
That one, shiitake.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Shiitake. Yeah. No worries. All right. So, and Oh, here's our pictures of our agaricus growing up there. All right. And there they go. And there they go. Okay, cool. Now we're into a whole nother topic. So this is IMOs. In my opinion, IMOs are IMOs are indigenous microorganisms. So indigenous meaning they are native to a place. I grew up in New England. I am a fourth generation American. I am not indigenous to this place. I am, by many people's views, a native because I've spent my whole life here, but I'm not indigenous to this place. Indigenous microorganisms are microorganisms that have spent a long time forming mutually reciprocal relationships with the other beings around them in an ecosystem. That's my definition there. This is important because when we think about farming practices in a changing climate, in the world to come, we are aware that we are going to have to be building soil, creating soil, and tending soil. And if you've been paying attention to the things that you put into your gardens and reading gardening books, you may have noticed that most gardening books talk about peat moss as like the thing to do. Get a lot of peat moss. I even occasionally use peat moss, but peat moss is a lovely fluffy material that is extracted from peat bogs, and it does have an ecological cost. There are only so much of them. Ditto bat guano. Bats poop, yes, but as we have been changing the world for the worse, bat colonies have not really survived. There's a lot less of them. They have a pretty funky fungus that is affecting them, and maybe a virus as well. But anyway, there just isn't as much guano to be used and spread. The soil amendments that we have, that we're adding in, the minerals, those get mined. The vermiculite, all of these things that we add into a place that we get shipped in, get mined or extracted or created or produced in some way and have to be carried in. If we run out of them, the cost goes up. People might extract even more in a furious bid to get as much as they can, and that ecosystem is plundered. I'm not saying don't go to your local gardening center and get things to bring back and make your gardens grow better. But I am saying that if we can be helping the soil by getting the indigenous microorganisms that are already there and helping them to grow really well, we will be doing a mitzvah, a good deed to the ecosystem around us. We will be using our human hands and our ability to walk around on these lovely feet that trees don't have and the mushrooms don't have. We'll be using our bodies in service of the place around us. And we get more food, we get more oxygen, we get more beautiful birds to watch, at shade from the trees. We get it all by being mutually in partnership and humbly in partnership, because as cool and amazing as we are as humans, we're not as cool and as amazing as microorganisms that are so teeny tiny that they can travel through the air, and so incredibly mighty that they can break down an entire tree and turn it into soil. Those are pretty cool. So our indigenous microorganisms, these little ones, when we hear that term, the IMOs, we're usually talking about fungi and bacteria. Not always, but mostly, primarily those. And usually, if we're talking about that in farming circles, we're talking about ones that people have collected from the area around them, that they've grown so that they can populate the soil with more of that. the idea of using beneficial microorganisms is not new. This is something that people from around the world for thousands and thousands of years have been doing for sure. And in next semester, we'll talk about indigenous land management practices from around the world and soil building practices from around the world throughout time. But the things that we get nowadays, those when we think of beneficial microorganisms, it's pretty common to see them coming in bottles or packages, and they might be activators, they might be inoculants, they might be compost teas, and so on. They're all available for purchase, but that means you have to spend money, and we are frugal. We do not like having to spend extra money that we could be spending on other cool things or putting back into our communities in different ways. So we're going to be gathering these. Not only is that good for our paychecks and good for the ecology because we're not extracting them elsewhere, we're not having to cart them in, it's also super good because these beings know how to be in relationship in that place. They are already there. They are in good connection with the beings around them. And so if there is drought, if there is a heat wave, if there's a forest fire, if there is a ton of rain, whatever happens, they're already there doing their best to help those other beings survive, to help pass nutrition from one tree to another, to hold the soils together. This is like the difference between being like, I see a social ill in the world. I am going to come in out of the goodness of my heart and insert myself into a community and do something really good, and I'll feel good about myself, and won't I be helpful? It's kind of the white saviorism of the farming world when we go out and buy these things, instead of being like, let me go see who's on the ground in the trenches doing the work and what they need, and asking those people and seeing and observing and taking time not to be super active, even though we really want to, but to observe and to support those systems and those cultures that are already present and in place. Does that make sense? Cool. So these, I know I talked about money, agricultural microbials. In one article that I read that is quoted down at the bottom of this slide, which you will get as a PowerPoint presentation in your at-home explorations, they predicted that agricultural microbials were estimated to become a $6 billion industry by 2022. And major agricultural companies like Bayer and Monsanto have begun investing heavily in them. Let us not give them more of our money.
No.
Right. Let's
No.
support our forests by asking them what they need, and our gardens and soils by asking them what they need, and then give that to them. Okay. So here we go. One of the coolest ways to do this is with something called Korean natural farming. And I will include a link there to a free ebook that talks about how to do this, as well as a couple of different websites from a Korean American woman who does really good work to, I'm not sure what his lineage is, but another guy who also does really good work. Korean natural farming is something that was created in the 60s by Dr. Cho Han-kyu. He was looking to design a way for farmers to not be reliant on synthetic chemicals and supplements in South Korea for their farming needs. And so Dr. Cho was thinking, okay, what does a farm need to be fertile and strong? And what is available on a farm? And so he thought about what are kind of not necessarily waste products, but products that aren't being returned back into the ecosystem in a way that is the most beneficial way possible. And he came up with things like eggshells and compost, weeds that us herbalists would probably be like, those are medicinal and delicious. Things like in like wild plants, compost, all of these things. And so he combined plant biology with a kind of national expertise in fermentation, Korea being home of kimchi and other delicious fermented foods. And so combined these things and tested them out and eventually developed what is now called Korean natural farming. And so Korean natural farming is all about inoculating substrates with mycelium and the microbes that are endemic and natural in a place, and then creating other beneficial things to support the plants at the different stages of the plant's life. So first off, we're building healthy soil. Second off, we're giving the plants the amendments that they need at the particular times that they need them. But instead of buying them, we're creating them from what's already there. So and the right nutrients at the right time is a KNF phrase. So Cho's Global Natural Farming is that's the one that's available for free to read. You can look that up, but I'll post a link as well. And so Dr. Cho talks about nutritive cycle theory, and that's the idea that plants and livestock need different nutrients during different stages of growth. If you are somebody who is a parent, you know that growing kids go through different phases where they're super hungry and they we need to make sure that they're getting enough minerals, enough vitamins. If you're somebody who has ever carried a child biologically, you know that your body was craving certain things. Even outside of reproduction and human growth, you might notice that at certain seasons, your body craves different things. In springtime, you might crave fresh salads. In wintertime, you might crave warming stews. This is all about being aware of the cycles of life. And there are myriad cycles overlapping and happening all at the same time. So in Korean natural farming, and that the top picture you see there is a wooden box. And what we do is we go out and we gather some of the mycelium, the healthy soil that's inoculated with mycelium, like you see in the top right picture there. There's like some twigs and maybe some moss and stuff like that. And we put that in a box with a wooden box with steamed rice. And steamed rice is the traditional menstruum. But again, we're being scrappy and we're trying not to have a lot of things being shipped in. So think of what's close to you. Oats might grow close to you. Sorghum, there's different grains, but we're looking for something that these microbes are going to grow on really well. And I wouldn't be surprised if we'll find other cool things that we can find for them to grow on. But in this particular practice, you take a box, and bamboo is really common where Dr. Cho is. So that's a typical one, or cedar, which has some nice antimicrobial benefits in it. So on the one hand, it's kind of like oxymoronic to use a cedar box, but on the other hand, you're getting in the things that you really want from the soil. So anyway, we can use pine. We will, because we have a lot of pine around here. So you take your rice, you take your couple of handfuls of the forest floor, you put them together, you cover this with a paper towel or a lightweight piece of fabric. You put a little bit more of that forest floor goodness on top. You get it all nice and moist. And then you leave it in a cage or some other way that it can breathe and it can get rain, but rodents can't get in because they are going to be like, oh my gosh, did you give me a treat? We do not want to be feeding the squirrels. We want to be feeding the soil. So over time, the mycelium will spread out, and you'll get what you see at the bottom image there, which is these spent grains with these like fluffy looking little bits of fungus growing there. Then we cover it up with a tarp. We leave it there for a week or so, sometimes less, sometimes more, depends on temperature, until it's all colonized the substrate. And then you see all that hyphae spreading through that. And then you can put that into your soil in different places, and that will continue to grow out. So you've basically made a like a nursery for these microbes. And now you get to spread them out and plant them. But along with that, there's also things that aren't just soil. So there's the part that is just to do with the plants. So think about those adding the right nutrients at the right time part. So Dr. Cho recommends giving water-soluble calcium to your plants when they're at the stage of their growth where they're at the crossover period, when the growth changes from vegetative to reproductive. They're about to flower, they're about to fruit. That's a good example. And instead of going out and buying calcium or putting calcium into the soil, you can make a foliar spray that you just spray on the plant itself, and you can put a little in the soil around them using apple scrap vinegar and eggshells. We have a ton of apples growing around here. I mean, use whatever fruit you have to make vinegar, or purchase vinegar if that works for you. But we have apples. We gather apples. We make applesauce and preserve fruit, and then we have the cores left over. So I take those cores and I make apple scrap vinegar with them. And then we have eggshells. I don't grow chickens or raise chickens, but I have friends who do. I like to trade with them. I save my eggshells because I'm a witch, and we're always saving eggshells for a whole bunch of purposes. But once you have your eggshells saved up, you can heat them up in the oven to kill any microbes that you don't want on there, and then put that into your vinegar, and it'll decompose and break down. And then you've made what's called WSCA, so water soluble calcium. And the container next to that, LAB, that's lactoacidic. Why am I blanking on that now? That's a lactic acid bacteria base. So that's like if you have whey, for example, you can use that. If you have dairy, there's a lot of, or if you have kimchi or sauerkraut, you're getting that lactic acid wash. You can put that in your soil too. So they're shelf stable, these preparations. They don't cost you hardly anything. They last for a long time, and you can share them. And again, all of this is going to be in your in that free handout. So then there's some other ones where you might make a fermented vegetable liquid, where you maybe like take some tomatoes that are growing there and you add in some brown sugar and some other stuff, and you utilize that. But even if you have to buy brown sugar, because most of us aren't somewhere where we can make that, it's still a very small amount of money compared to what you would be paying if you were buying soil amendments. And then you can swap things out locally too. So there's a lot of KNF work that's happening in Hawaii and other tropical places where they're using like banana leaves to ferment. We don't have bananas here, but we're herbalists. So think about, like we talked about earlier when we said like an antifungal is an antifungal, an antioxidant is an antioxidant. Think about herbs that we know of that grow around here that are nutritive. What is a nutritive herb that grows around here? A plant, a nutritive
Japanese
plant.
knotweed is.
Japanese knotweed. Let's try fermenting some Japanese knotweed. They're endemic. It's invasive. Why not? We know there's lots of antioxidants in that plant.
Yeah, good master.
Yeah, that's great. Let's work with invasive plants and try and ferment them. That's a great idea. And then utilize them in a different way. What's a plant that we would think of if we were feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling like really like depleted. I need some good like vitamins and minerals in me. I'm going to make soups or tinctures or things with this. Calendula, absolutely. Let's work with calendula. Who else might be a good one? Seaweed, perfect. Let's work with seaweed. Absolutely. The list goes on. You got mullein, use your mullein. You've got, if you've got plantain, use your plantain. Comfrey, absolutely. Use your comfrey. So these are all different strategies. And as Dr. Cho says, you cannot lead the agricultural industry with a civilization that revolve around opportunism and also cannot depend on practical reasoning, scientific findings, analysis, and calculations. Conventional method of farming, which is simply imitation of agricultural administration and science, is not the key to farming. Disregards each region's particular characteristics. So we are going to work with what the regions around us have. Again, here's our inspiration for that is our mycelium. All right, so Blackbird's Daughter is a United Plant Savers Botanical Sanctuary. It's part of Spruton Pond Farm. We have 125 acres that has a conservation easement and has been loved up on for the past 51 years now. And so we're kind of the last folks to come in and put our spin on what this looks like. And so between my husband, Steve, and myself, and the herb kin, like you all that come here and volunteers and friends, we've been able to plant a lot of indigenous plants here and some ornamental plants, a lot of food plants, and we've really been able to share a ton of plants and mushrooms with other people and information as well. Some of these plants go into cooking pots, some of them go into tinctures, some of them go into fabulous body care products like the soaps that Christy, who's holding this phone right now, makes, her sassy skin and soul care. Some of them go into all sorts of different things, remedies that get shared with Herbalists Without Borders. And some of them are going to go back into the soil. We also grow a lot of plants that get eaten by the deer and the turkeys. And you know what? I'm mostly okay with that. So the other thing that we do is we grow plants here that are at risk so that we can rematriate them back into the wild. So if you find your way here and you have a forest in an ecosystem that you've paid attention to, and you know about, you might be able to find plants here, such as black cohosh, who are native at-risk medicinal plants. Dig them up here and take them and put them in the forests near you. So that's another cool thing we do. And we can trade herbal remedies. So if we have plants here, such as a lot of pines that grow around here, a lot of witch hazel, maybe you have yelpon that grows near you, or other plants that grow in different ecosystems, we can trade. Oh my gosh.
And the turkeys are flying.
And then we have turkeys roosting and flying. Hi. All right. So,
Ooh, with a hard landing.
he is also called earth eagle in indigenous cultures. It's tricky saying indigenous cultures. I don't mean everybody believes the same thing. That would be ludicrous. But in a lot of kind of pan Native American cultures, turkey is viewed as a sacred bird and has a medicine of giveaway. So there's a little confirmation right there for us. So, and it was almost our national bird instead of the bald eagle. I think things would have been different if we'd chosen turkey. Anyway, let's wander down our path and we'll see some of the cool beings that are. Come on this way. We have a lot of deer that have been eating throughout here. And that's okay. We let them graze. Over here is our all bodies accessible trail. if walking is tricky when you're here, I suggest going down the trail. It's a slower walk. It's a gentle walk. And as we go, we'll see a lot of plants that are planted, but also some that we haven't planted, such as this low bush blueberry right down here. They're already in flower. The bees love these, and I love the fruit. So do the turkeys, like that friend up there. And they are reliant on a particular kind of mycorrhizome. The mycorrhizomes that help them thrive are mycorrhizomes that work for the heath family, the blueberry family, ericoid mycorrhizae. And so we're going to go down to a place where we know that there are a lot of blueberry bushes already, and we know that there's a lot of mycelium already in the mushroom trail. So let's go get some of that, and we'll bring it back so that we can plant some with some blueberries that we have today. So this area here looks really scrubby. This is where our septic system is under here. It's really sandy. But
Excuse me.
there are a lot of plants that grow well in sandy conditions. And you can see here we have bugleweed coming up. We have some violets. The bugleweed, also called a juga, that's that beautiful purple one there. Absolutely medicinal. There's self-heal that will grow here. There's a lot of our friends, the daffodils, that have gone by. So there are lots of beings that grow here. And as the seasons pass and we learn who likes to grow here, we can learn from those plants what the soil has. We can send the soil out for testing, which is a really good idea. And your state extension service will help you with that. But you could also pay attention to the plants that grow here. And there are, in fact, some books that will tell us, like, oh, if violet grows in your soil, you probably have a lot of this or not a lot of that. And so you can add in more of the indigenous microorganisms to help fertilize the soil, or you can add in more plants that are happy in that growing condition. And that's what we have, which is why we have not just sand here. So as we walk down through the bluets, or the clover, or the different kinds of grasses, the dandelion, plantain, you see a lot of really cool beings that are coming up right now. And this, I'm so glad you can see this lovely being here. So this tree peony blooms ecstatically for just a few days, and this is one of them. They just started popping today. In front of this tree peony, this is last year's seed pods from black cohosh, one of those at-risk medicinals that we talked about. So we have planted them here, and here they are coming up. There's another one coming up. Here's another little one coming up right here. And here we have some ferns that are coming up. These are not fiddlehead ferns. If we had more time, I would show you. Oh, here we go. I knew I planted some. So these are not actually the ones that I wanted. The best fiddleheads are the ones that come from ostrich ferns. And instead of having these little scales attached here, they'll have a paper coating that comes kind of right off really easily. We'll show you some at some point. We also have a lot of Solomon seal. The hummingbirds love this plant. There's some more of the black cohosh. This is a kind of a wild geranium called Herb Robert. And in here on this mushroom trail, this is a trail that we've made. So we put in logs that were downed logs, and we've put in mycelium, like those mushroom blocks, and then we've covered them over the past couple of years with leaves that have come down, more branches, garden waste, if you will. So we're building soil. And as we build the soil, that waste starts to break down and becomes humus. You can see little worms are in here already. There's a lot of little insects. There's also little pathways in here. So we have animals that live in here, tunnel up, they poop, they pee, they live their lives, they decompose when they're gone. That in turn feeds the soil. I even see a little spider egg here. I'll put right there. I think that's who that is. So there's a lot of life in here already, but there's going to be even more to help little beings like these blueberries growing underground. And so if we are to dig down in here, we might see some mycorrhizals. So we're going to look around and see what we can find. I don't see any right in here necessarily on my first scoop. I see some depleted soil from prior years where this is really dry. There's not a lot of like life in here. There wasn't like this probably went through a lot of flooding, this area, which we can also tell by the size of the bases of the trees extended out when this place has been underwater. So we're rebuilding this soil. So no mycorrhizomes here that we're going to take. I know I found some over there though. So let's look and we'll just keep wandering. When I was laying this part of the path a couple of years ago, last year, we put down this this top layer of soil. And I'm already hitting roots and rootlets here. Let's flip this up and see if there's any parts here. You can see roots. This is a runner from the Canada Mayflower. So we haven't hit the mycorrhizomes that we want yet. That's not to say that this wouldn't be useful. Aha! Look, check this out. They were hiding in the top layer. See this white stuff right here? See how they look like little bits of fuzz? They are little bits of fuzz. And if I get out my loop, which I try and wear around my neck at all times, you may be able to see what they look like up close. There's a lot of glare, so I don't know if you can see that. But this is the mycorrhizomes that we're talking about. This is the hyphae stretching out here. I'm like, okay, I disturbed a little bit. I got some. Where else is it? Oh, it's coming from over here. It's coming in over here. Ooh, and just by moving the leaf litter on the very top, there's a whole nice big bunch. So we can take this handful here. Ooh, look, you see how it's stretching? Can you folks see that? It looks like spider webs, kind of. Yeah. So these are sacred little beings, part of the giant web of the microbes here. And because in here, this is an area that has a lot of blueberries, I'm pretty willing to bet that these ones are going to be beneficial for the blueberries that we're going to plant. So may I pass a handful to whomever wants to hold it? Sacred little beings there. Cool. Now I can take another walk because I like to gather them from different places if possible. So we'll walk a little further over here. Now I know that there's a lot of mycelium in here. I can see last year's fruiting bodies of some false turkey tails there. There's some ginger here. A lot of beautiful medicinal trees that we're walking through. And we're just And this is a big wild blueberry up here. So you have the short blueberries, the low bush blueberries, and we have the high bush blueberries. And this one here, you can see some old farm equipment there. There's some wisteria vines that I need to get off of here so this doesn't choke this. I'm not even going to use this shovel. Can I pass that? Thank you. I'm just going to come in with my hands. Pull away. Right in here. Here it is. Here's what we're looking for. There's little bits of roots in here for sure. So if you're doing this and you know that there's invasive plants or plants that you don't want to move, be mindful of that. But I'm not worried about the roots. I'm going for the microbes. Okay, so now we have microbes. And we have these. Thank you. Nice. And now we have a spot over here that we've cleared. These are hugelkultur beds that we're building up. These will be our tree guilds. And these are the kitchen gardens that we've spent the past 7 or 8 years that I've been here, 7 years, I think, building up. And so today, earlier during sanctuary steward hours, the herb kid who are here helped lay down these bits of mulch that came from trees that were felled here. We got some from the town dump. The transfer station has mulch for town residents. And so I'm just going to pull these top layers aside. And then, may I see the shovel, please? And may I see that the mycelium? And if you will lovingly place our mycelium here, we're going to just turn this into the soil. So we add you in with love and gratitude. Thank you for being who you are. We can't wait for you to grow more. Yay! Thank you, little ones.
It will matter if the wood chips are treated too.
It will matter if
Yeah.
wood chips are treated. Absolutely. Yeah. So getting them locally. We had a lot of big storms that were down or that brought down a lot of trees this past April. So there were a lot of local arborists that in the town worked with them to make a communal town mulch pile, basically, which is really cool. So people can come and take some bucket loads and put them in their gardens. So now we have this place here that we can plant blueberries. And in addition to the ones that grow here, I placed an order from an organization called Fedco, which grows local indigenous plants for the Indakana region, and they're up in Maine. And so we bought a couple of different kinds of blueberries. So those are waiting for us. We'll plant them tomorrow during the Sacred Spaces Altered Places class. And let's see, what time are we at? Does anybody know?
Like 5:50.
5:50. Okay, cool. So our last part is our communal kitchen witching, which I totally forgot about before we came down here. We have reishi, local reishi that we grew, or that we wildcrafted rather, that I've sliced up and dried. And we've put that in a pot of water to decoct. And we could, to that, add in a bunch of different things to make our immunity. So it's already decocted. Now, if we had 10 more minutes, what I would have us do is I would have us gather some of the pine needles from the pines here that are growing maybe too close to one another to thrive, or they're in a place that we don't really want, such as there's some pines here in the fields that I've left here so that people can have easy access to make medicine, take them home with them. So we would gather some pine needles, we would gather some hemlock needles, and we'll walk over and I'll show you the hemlocks, and we'll kind of end by this sacred stone formation over here. So in future classes, I'll make sure we have enough time to do this. But all we would do is we would add in those bits, those needles, little leaves, whatever we found that we wanted to that's growing around here that's beneficial, and add them into our decoction. Simmer them, or bring them almost to a simmer. So we're making an infusion and a decoction, and we drink that. So if you come to the sanctuary, you'll have lots of time to have lots of community with us in person. So let's walk this way. And as we do, even if you're joining us virtually, you can put your energy and intention into this land that has been home to people for at least 10,000 years. We're really grateful and humbled to be the current residents and stewards of this place. And we invite you to come make medicine from here, take this to your communities, come and have some solace, have a retreat here. Let this place restore you as it does for us. So this is Grandmother Oak. And as we walk towards her, we give our gratitude for stewarding this place and stretching your roots out. Thank you for reaching out and connecting with the other trees through the mycelium. We thank you, mycelium under our feet.
Sasha also said thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Sasha. We're so glad that you're here. Hope that you're here in person soon. So we give our thanks to all of the beings under here. We thank you, grasses and mosses, who protect the soil from evaporation so that all of these other beings can live. We're so grateful to you, black cohoshes. We're so grateful to you, peonies, hydrangeas, spotted lungwort, pulmonaria, dandelions. Oh my goodness, so we love you. Asters and chickweeds, violets, vincas, fluid. All of you. We are so grateful to you. I see a burdock. We have calamus root. We're going to be transplanting you out of this tub. You've been so good being root bound for a couple of years. We're finally going to make you this year, really soon, a wetland pond that you can thrive in. We're so grateful to you. More ajuga, taking this place where the soil gets pushed aside every year by the snowplow. You keep holding it together and adding beauty. Look at you, Forsythia. And we're grateful to you, maples. I'm sorry you had to lose some branches, but I promise it's not in vain. We're going to build so much good soil with you and raise so many mushrooms. Thank you, clovers. Thank you, acorns. Thank you, mosses. Thank you, lichens and sedums. And thank you, rocks. And so this is where we'll end this really sweet little garden. Once upon a time, I came here and I didn't know what this place was going to be, and I still don't really. But we had a marvelous thing that started happening. Every so often, I would walk around, and my vision would change, and I would see a place and it looked different. And I got the impression that that was what this land wanted. And so I've been creating those spaces as the land tells me ever since. And this was one of the very first ones. So thank you, glacial erratics. Thank you, umbilicaria, lichens and mosses. Thank you, trees. Thank you, microbes. And thank you, Herbkin, for spending this time together with us in sacred learning. We're so grateful to you. Bye.